Toronto in the early 1970s was a city that was booming. New suburbs were spreading out across North York and Scarborough. Factories offered jobs, schools were crowded with students, and downtown Toronto was alive with music, protest, coffee houses, and counterculture. Canada's youth were stepping into a world very different from their parents. The old ways of the 1950s were fading. A new generation was searching for freedom, independence, and identity. But like all cities going through change, Toronto had its shadows. Drug use was spreading among young people. Violent crimes were rising, and one of the most dangerous habits of the time was hitchhiking. It was cheap, easy, and common. So common that most teenagers thought nothing of sticking their thumbs out to get a ride from one place to another. But in that convenience hid enormous risk. It was in this world that 16-year-old Yvonne Leroux lived. Yvonne was a student at Emory Collegiate, a high school in the northwest corner of Toronto. She was, by all accounts, bright, kind, and independent. But like many teenagers, she struggled to find her place. For about a year and a half before her death, Yvonne had been drawn into the city's drug scene. By the summer of 1972, she wanted out. She even went to police for protection, telling them she refused to continue her role in a drug ring operation where she was asked to leave packages for others to pick up. That choice, to step away from crime, may have saved her soul, but it also may have marked her for danger. On the evening of November 29, 1972, Yvonne left her family's home on Topeka Road near Jane and Finch. She was going to a group therapy session at the youth clinic on Oakdale Road near Finch Avenue West. The program was run in partnership with York Finch General Hospital and Westview Continental Secondary School. At around 7 p.m., she arrived at the clinic. She stayed until 10 o'clock that night. And then she walked out the doors into the cold November air. Her plan was simple: get home, but she never arrived. The next morning around 8:30 a.m., a man driving along Green Lane in Kings Township, a rural road, surrounded by open fields, saw something that made him pull over. Lying at the side of the road was the body of a young girl. She had been brutally bludgeoned to death. The victim was quickly identified as Yvonne Leroux. She was only 16 years old. For Yvonne's family, the news was devastating. One day she had walked out the door as a daughter and a sister. The next day, they were asked to identify her body. Her mother, Diane, carried the pain for decades. She once said in an interview, she never grew up, she never got married, she never had a chance in life. The investigation began immediately. Detectives considered several theories. Some believed Yvonne might have been hitchhiking home and was picked up by a dangerous stranger. Others feared her refusal to cooperate with the drug ring had led to her murder. They interviewed countless people. They chased every lead. They even posted a $50,000 reward for information, but the case went nowhere. For the next 5 decades, yes, 5 decades, the murder of Yvonne Leroux remained one of Toronto's most haunting cases. To understand why this case lingered for so long, we have to step back into Toronto in the 1970s. The city was on edge. Crime was climbing. In 1972 alone, Toronto recorded over 60 homicides, a number that shocked a public still adjusting to the reality of urban violence. At the same time, teenagers were more independent than ever. Without cell phones, parents had no way of tracking their children. So, once you walked out the door, you were on your own. Hitchhiking was so common it barely raised an eyebrow. But predators also knew that. For young girls like Yvonne, the danger was real and often fatal. What investigators didn't know at the time was that the man responsible for Yvonne's murder was already moving among them. His name was Bruce Charles Cantillon. In 1972, Cantillon was 26 years old. He lived in Toronto and he already had a history of violence against women. Police records showed he had committed assaults before. He was unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. But in the 1970s, police had no way of linking him to Yvonne. Less than 2 years later, 1974, Cantillon took his own life by suicide. He died without ever facing charges, without ever being named a suspect, and without ever being connected to Yvonne's murder. For decades, his name was lost to history. But science was about to change everything. In 2022, with traditional investigative techniques exhausted, York Regional Police decided to turn to investigative genetic genealogy, a method that combines DNA profiling with genealogical research. The process began with DNA evidence being collected from Yvonne's case back in 1972. This evidence had been carefully preserved, even though technology at the time couldn't make full use of it. 50 years later, scientists were able to extract a full DNA profile. That profile was uploaded into public genealogy databases where people submit their DNA to find relatives and build family trees. From there, investigators began the painstaking process of building out connections. They identified distant relatives of the unknown suspect, and slowly, through elimination and research, they traced the branches of the family tree back down to one man, Bruce Charles Cantillon. The DNA matched. There was no doubt after 50 years Yvonne's killer had a name, Bruce Charles Cantillon. On November 15, 2023, York Regional Police held a press conference. For the first time in half a century, the public heard the truth. The Deputy Chief of Investigations, Alvaro Almeida, announced that the case had been solved. The murderer of Yvonne Leroux was Bruce Cantillon, a man who had died nearly half a century earlier. While Cantillon could never be brought to trial, the revelation brought closure to Yvonne's family. In a statement, they said, "Yvonne is far from forgotten. Getting some answers will never change what happened or bring her back. It is not justice in a traditional sense, but it was truth, and sometimes truth is the only justice left."
I'd like to thank all of you for joining us at York Regional Police Headquarters. This press conference is being held to provide an update on a cold case, a 51-year-old homicide investigation.
Yvonne was only 16 years old. She was a daughter, a friend, a young woman who wanted more from life. She should have grown up. She should have grown up, fallen in love, chased dreams, and lived to see her own children grow. Instead, her life was stolen. But thanks to decades of persistence and the power of science, her story didn't vanish into the cold files of history. Today, we speak her name, Yvonne Leroux. We remember her and we remind ourselves that justice, no matter how long it takes, can still find its way. The murder of Yvonne Leroux teaches us many things about the dangers faced by young women, about the failures of past systems, and about the relentless pursuit of justice. But above all, it teaches us about memory. Because as long as we remember Yvonne, as long as her story is told, she is not forgotten. 51 years after her life was taken, we can finally say her name with truth, with dignity, and with closure. Rest in peace, Yvonne Leroux. I'm the voice, and I will return next week with another cold case. Until then, stay safe.